On November 9th, after I shook off the hangover, I looked at my phone and I had 12 missed calls. And 9 of them were from this gentleman. And when I finally called him back, we talked for a couple of hours about an idea that is now the Arena Summit. Ravi, Gupta, I don't know that there's a person that is better embodied by this phrase, every day I'm hustling. Since November 9th, he's been hustling to make sure that this summit happens. Please join me in welcoming Ravi Gupta.
All right. It's one of the perks of getting to choose all the songs for everybody. I get to pick Staten Island music for myself. But actually, let's give a round of applause for Jason for being a great MC. And it actually breaks my heart that Jason, in being an MC, doesn't get his own intro music. So, Navaris, do we have something for him? Maybe we do. Possibly. I also want to shout out my mother. Why don't you stand up, Mom? So, my mom is an incredibly patient woman. At Arena, we're very pro-mom. And just to give you an idea of how patient she is, I have a brother who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you for that. He's back here. I have a brother who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's my only brother, and he's a federal prison guard in a federal prison, and he's a Trump supporter. And so my mom, just to give you an idea, it just never stops for her. She's got children on either side of the divide, and we've been divided on one issue after another since we were born. And so let's give it up for Eileen Gupta, everybody. And so those of you, how many of you are on our Slack channels? All right, so those of you on Slack might have noticed that I left my laptop at JFK Airport before coming here. And so for the past 2 days, I've been puttering around Raleigh, North Carolina with a book and a notepad. And one of our Arena colleagues so graciously offered to grab my laptop for us, Perry, and he grabbed it from JFK for me, and then called me and said, I've got it. And he unfortunately called me from Austin, Texas, because he wasn't coming to Raleigh. Yeah. So what I'm about to share with you is 2 days of just absolute bitter focus with my notepad and this incredible book, which actually I was planning to share with you anyway. So this book is called Homo Deus. It's a book by an Israeli thinker called Yuval Harari, who also wrote a book called Sapiens, which went on to, critical acclaim, was even recommended by President Obama. And both Sapiens and Homo Deus, in my opinion, are two of the most important books to come out in a very long time. And both books touch on this idea that they touch on many ideas, but one particularly important idea, which is that one of the most important things that separates humans from other species on this planet, and also certain communities within the human race from each other, is this idea of massive cooperation. And that actual successful civilizations and successful movements are usually characterized by extreme mass cooperation. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. And here's a passage to illustrate that. So this is from Harari. Throughout history, disciplined armies easily routed disorganized hordes, and unified elites dominated the disorderly masses. In 1914, for instance, 3 million Russian noblemen, officials, and business people lorded over 180 million peasants and workers. The Russian elite knew how to cooperate in defense of common interests, whereas the 180 million commoners were incapable of effective mobilization. So I've thought a lot about this paragraph, and I want to put it to you this way. We are here in North Carolina particularly because we have a group of unified elites dominating the masses here, and they've taken that playbook all around this country to dominate the masses all across this country. And as somebody put it before, we've got to wake up to this. And to give you an idea, just to set the stage here, some people have thrown a few facts out there, but let me lay it all out there. North Carolina is roughly a 50-50 state, like if we're generous about it, right? So you had a couple points separating Trump from Clinton, Romney from Obama, Obama from McCain. You have a Democratic governor, you have a Democratic attorney general, and in the last election, 54% of voters came out and voted for Republicans in the U.S. House rate. Despite that, 77% of House members from North Carolina are Republicans, and you have a supermajority in the state legislature. We have a system here that's rigged where at best half of the population is imposing its will on the entire population of the state if we're being generous. And we have to untangle the web of what's going on here. And this is stuff that was in play before Trump was president, and that if we're not careful will be in play after Trump is president. And there are three pieces to this that I want to focus on, and our audience members already threw some of these out here. There are three parts of this playbook. Number one is massive political spending by a few billionaires. Some of them are based in North Carolina. A lot of them are not based in North Carolina. And so that spending became the glue for a lot of other terrible changes in the state, including our second piece here, which is racial and political gerrymandering, which has gotten so extreme here that we have our politicians picking the voters instead of the other way around. And the third piece here is that we've got, as we heard so eloquently from our people, we've got voter rights infringement in this state that is at an unprecedented level for most of us who are roughly my age or younger. This is the worst we've seen in our lifetime. There's some of you who've seen worse in your lifetime, but in our lifetime, this is about as bad as we've ever seen. And if you're part of a marginalized group, it is harder today to vote in North Carolina than any other time in our lifetime. And so something's got to change. And so right now, I would like anybody here who's been working for justice in North Carolina to stand up, and I want us to give them a round of applause because they've been working hard on this for years. So we came to North Carolina for you. So we came here to shine the spotlight on the work that you're doing, and you need to be heard. You need our attention. And so first and foremost, that's what we're here to do. We're here to bring our attention to your causes. And beyond that, beyond the groups that you're going to hear from and the elected officials that you're going to hear from North Carolina, you're going to hear from some national groups that have emerged since the election that are actually going to fight the good fight for local candidates and organizations in places like North Carolina. And one example is an organization called Flippable, which is leveraging resources from around the country to fight these fights, and importantly, doing it in a way that's keeping with our values, so that we don't have to rely on a small group of oligarchs to make change, but we actually can leverage the success of the masses, right? But we're not just here to talk about winning for any one particular party or even just defeating one president, although those things are definitely going to come up this weekend for sure. We're here to talk about who we want to be during this fight, and importantly, who we want to be after we win this fight. Because that's the key here. Donald Trump is going to come and go. We have to think about what kind of future we want, and to underscore that, I'm going to take you back to Harari's work, where in this same book, Harari takes us to December 21st, 1989, and into Romania, where Nicolae Ceausescu was a corrupt dictator, and I apologize on behalf of my mom, who made me go to college with her when I was in elementary school and go to Soviet history, so I'm sharing a little bit more. But Ceausescu was brutal, and on December 21st, 1989, the Soviet Union was crumbling. So the wall had come down in Berlin. The Soviet Union was withdrawing resources from Soviet bloc states, and in places like Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc., there were massive revolutions happening. And so Ceausescu thought he would do what he always did, which was whip up everybody he could, and the police, and the radio, and the TV, and get as many people into a square in Bucharest as possible, and get everybody to pledge their support, broadcast it throughout the country, and move on and show everybody that he's got a tight grip on power. And so he did that. He got 80,000 people into a square in Bucharest that day, and he was 8 minutes into his speech, and you can actually go to YouTube and watch this. And he's 8 minutes into his speech. He's actually mid-sentence when one person in that 80,000 person crowd started to boo him. One person. You think about how courageous that one person must have been and how much faith they had in their common citizens. And that one boo turned into 2 boos and 3 boos. And after a very short period of time, there were chants against Ceausescu in that square. And within 2 days, he was chased out of the city. And within a few days after that, he was taken out of power. And so these are stories, I bet you a lot of people in this room have never even heard that story. And we could stop and you could say, wow, this is the perfect example of what President Obama was talking about how one voice can change a room and a city and a country, right? But actually, the story of Romania is actually a cautionary one for all the people here. Because after Ceausescu was deposed from power, a huge lesson was learned for all of us, which is when a movement succeeds, the most organized group is the group that always takes power. And so the group that wound up taking power in Romania was a group of former communist officials who wound up seizing power, seizing state assets, selling them at a discount to their friends. And those people are still the elites who run Romania to this day. And they were the most organized in the aftermath. And just to quote Harari on this one, he says, the masses who risked their necks in Bucharest settled for scraps because they did not know how to cooperate and how to create an efficient organization to look after their own interests. And we could say, well, that was just one example, right? But if you actually search history, it's harder to find the counterexamples. I was personally involved before the uprisings throughout the Arab world. I worked at the State Department in the years preceding that. And in 2011, you had 100,000 people taken to the Tahrir Square, right? And much was made of the power of Facebook and Twitter, just like the power of radio and TV in Romania. But what happened in Egypt was a nearly identical story. Movement succeeds, leaders taken out of power, and the people who wound up winning the aftermath of that were the only organized groups that existed. In that case, it was the Muslim Brotherhood and the army, who at one step after another took power and wound up co-opting that movement that was so powerful at its time. So we can't get hijacked. We can't get hijacked by our establishment, and we can't get hijacked by any other establishment. And if you think that this is just an earnest warning, think about this week where people were celebrating. They were celebrating on Twitter as we defeated this health care bill and celebrating the fact that the Koch brothers pledged 7 figures to anybody who opposed that bill, which, if you think about it, is the problem, right? That's the problem. And though Trump is the problem, like any of you who follow Marvel Comics or any of these Netflix shows knows that at the end of the season, the villain you think is the villain is just one of the villains, right? Like there's always some other villain behind the other villain, right? And just remember that Trump or no Trump, that was still our problem, right? And long after he's gone, we're going to have this problem. And so what do we do about it? We have to recognize a few things. Number one, we have to recognize that numbers and energy alone are not enough. They're important and they're necessary ingredients for our success, but they are not enough. The second piece here is that tools, and I know we've got our digital crew here, so I'm going to duck for a second, but these tools, these digital tools, and in the case of radio and TV, those tools are absolutely necessary to help spread our message, but they alone are not enough either. Egypt being a great example of that. What we need in addition to all of those things is we need an organized community. We need an organized community, and we need both parts of that. We need it to be organized, so we have to be like competent and operationally sound, but we also have to be a community. And I'm going to spend more time on this idea of community than I'm going to talk about the organized part of it, because the community I feel like is so missing, not just in politics, but in a lot of places in this world right now. And so I want to take you back for a second to talk about where this community came from. Jason talked about the fact that we were all talking to each other after the election. And we really just thought when we were putting on that first summit a few weeks after the election that we'd get 30 or 40 people who'd come and pledge to run for office or more meaningfully enter the arena in some way. But instead of 30 or 40 people, we got over 400 people from over 30 states, and over 150 of those people declared that they were going to run for office. And as impressive as those numbers sound, the individual stories behind those numbers are actually what inspire me every single day. And so you have Haley Stevens, who's launched an exploratory committee in Michigan's 11th congressional district. You have somebody I know you've probably never heard of her named Liz Jaff, who ran for vice chair. And I had a chance to go out to Atlanta at Liz's invitation and see the fact that, at the last Nashville Summit, we introduced Jason Kander, and I said through his loss, he gave us hope. And this time I'm here to say Liz, through her loss, gave us hope, because what I saw in Atlanta was a conversation that changed because of her candidacy. And that people were now talking about the emerging groups that so many of you represent and that have been under-discussed in some of these rooms, these elite rooms out there. I also heard about a conversation about transparency of how we pick our leaders that was so needed before this election that obviously became a headache for all of us and prevented us from having the representation that we really needed. But what's important here is that through these stories of Haley and Liz and everybody else who's committed and doing the work, is that we at Arena are a lot different than a lot of other organizations. We are not, as we said at the last time, we're not your oracles. We're not going to answer most questions for you. We're your Sherpas, right? We're going to help you get up the mountain, but you're the one who's going to get to the summit. And going through this journey alongside you, like they say that time is relative, right? Time since this election, it feels like it's been stretched. Like, there are a lot of people in this room that I consider some of my best friends that I met you only around that time, right? And I know a lot of you feel this way. And going through this process of learning about the movement with you, alongside of you, has actually made Arena reformulate its mission. And so we've been out there, we've been to tons of states, seeing the work that you do, been on tons of calls with you. We've now met a ton of new people, like elected officials, including a lot of elected officials here in North Carolina. And a lot of us have taken protests a lot more seriously. I know personally, outside of a few protests for racial justice, I hadn't been protesting since the Iraq War. And I was out there at the federal courthouse. My mom, who's here, went to the Women's March, as I know some other people did. And we've learned. And the conclusion that we came to about the movement is that there's this unprecedented political entropy that's out there. And by entropy, we mean that there is energy and there is disorder right now. And the energy is obvious. We have more people declaring they want to run for office than ever before, more people calling their representatives, more people donating time and energy and money to the causes, more people sharing news, caring about the news, reading about it. And that's the good part. The part that we need to focus on, which is natural, is the fact that all of these new entrants did not have a structure to feed into, right? A lot of us felt like the structures of power were unaccountable and out of touch with a lot of us, even those of us who've been involved in politics at some high levels. And so now with all of this energy feeding the system now, we've got people with overlapping missions. Sometimes I'll talk to 6 or 7 people in a week who are focused on the same issue. And a lot of times those people don't even know about each other. And then when they do learn about each other, they don't have the time or the resources to come together and collaborate or merge or whatever is necessary to be effective. And so we at the Arena have reformulated our mission to not be about just any one discrete part of that challenge. So we had a few hypotheses. Are we going to do candidate recruitment? Are we going to do state legislative capacity, et cetera? And we actually went around and interviewed a lot of people and kicked down each one of those ideas in isolation because we found that members of our community were already doing that, and we're never going to get in your way. We're going to support you. But what we realize is that the community itself is what's needed right now. And so our reformulated mission as the Arena is to create communities for emerging civic entrepreneurs and leaders like you. So that's our mission. And there are 3 ways that we're carrying out this mission. Number 1, and most importantly, we're going to continue to do summits. Because there has never been a time where face-to-face deep interactions have been more needed than right now. And we're not going to do summits just every year because, Lord, a year is a long time right now. Who knows what's going to happen a year from now, right? We want to get together as quickly as possible. And so we're going to do these summits every 3 or 4 months. And we're going to go to places that have been overlooked in the national conversation. So we've been to Nashville. We're now in Raleigh. We're going to Detroit, Michigan next. I imagine there's some Michigan people in the room. And we're going to go out west during the summertime. And these summits help us shine the spotlight on important leaders. And I'm starting to see you. I really am moved by the energy from the North Carolina crowd in here and our Virginia people that we've met. We're going to places where people need the spotlight. But we're also inviting people into our community because we need to grow this community and we need to do it deliberately because this room, though important and compelling, is still not big enough. And so we got to go out there and find people. The second part of our mission, and we announced this last week, is we've launched an accelerator program for new leaders, whether they're starting new civic organizations or launching candidacies for office. And this gets to the point of the organization of our community and the fact that we need to be organized. And so we have 5 focus areas that we're picking fellows for. One are state legislative capacity, congressional capacity, policy, democracy protection, which is gerrymandering, voting rights, etc. And then the 5th is bridging across the divide. And we are picking people who are new entrants because we believe that the best ideas and energy are going to come from people who are not part of the establishment. And no offense to anybody from the establishment here, but that's our focus, is helping you. And so the third part of what we're doing is a spotlight program, so that whether you're in the accelerator or not, and you're starting to see this now, it's why we have more cameras than we did before, is we're starting to tell the stories of people within our movement, because it is lonely out there. I hear it in your voices, in some of you. It's lonely out there, and losing again and again and again before you win is tiring, and you need a boost of energy. You need a room that you're going to come to, and a blog that's going to write you up, or press people that are going to hound people to write stories about you when you lose, and hold you up as an example even when you lose. And so that's our Spotlight program. But I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the Spotlight program and Accelerator today, because you're here for the summits. So let me quickly tell you what to expect for the rest of this program, and then get out of your way. There are 3 parts of our programs for our summits. The first part, which is the first third, which is you're in right now, is the vision setting, which is where you hear from people. And we do a little bit more talking at you than we're probably comfortable with. And we share our beliefs, we share a vision, and importantly, we help motivate you to take a bigger leap. So if you're thinking of running for dog catcher, we want you to run for something else where you affect more people, unless you're just super passionate about catching dogs, right? And so we're going to try to push you to the next level. If your barrier to entry is that you think that it's too early, or that somebody else is going to stop you or something like that, if that's what's preventing you, we're going to try to coach you through that. Because as I said last time, if Donald Trump teaches us anything, it's that anybody can do it, right? Like, anybody can do it. The second part here is that we do breakout sessions where we give you knowledge and skills, and do not expect anything comprehensive in a few hours, right? We're gonna expose you to a lot of our friends in the audience here who've done incredible work, whether it's locally or nationally, and it just gives you a taste, right, of a given issue area and a skill set. The third part, as we heard about, is we break you into regional groups, and that's when you take the first critical steps in achieving the goals that you've hopefully laid out already. Now, how should you approach the summit? So that's the details of what's going to happen. What should you do at the summit? Number 1, as Jason said, is be present. I don't care whether you tweet about us or not. I really don't. You could tweet during the breaks. You could tweet at the party. But I want you to give your attention to the people that you're in the room with, and I want them to give you the same. Attention is such a scarce resource these days. And I can tell you right now that thinking back on Nashville, that was priceless time. I think back, and I've met so many people now that I admire even more than I knew when I was in the room with them. And just thinking back to, like, any minute I wasted there bothers me. And you're going to think the same way about the people we meet over the course of this weekend. And that also means don't come and go from sessions if you can help it. So if you're going to be in a session, be in a session. If you're out of a session, be out of the session, because it's distracting to people. And if you're a neurotic like me, you think that people leaving is some indication of something that you're saying. The second piece is step out of your comfort zone. So if you were planning to go to cybersecurity session because you really care a lot about cybersecurity, you probably know enough. You don't need to go to that one. Go to something else, right? The second piece is be vulnerable with the people around you, because I can tell you right now, this community is the community that you want to be vulnerable around. As long as that person is not wearing a press badge. And then just be careful. The third part is don't sell yourself. You don't have to sell yourself, I promise. Do not sell yourself. Get off the treadmill, as a dean used to tell me. Get off the treadmill and enjoy the people around you, and I promise you, through the process of building strong relationships with people and having fun with people, over time, whatever you need to professionally accomplish will happen. I promise you that. The fourth piece is abandon your self-importance and hierarchy. One of the most beautiful things that happened after the election was that I was able to call people who previously it was really hard to get on the phone. They were like, I worked at the White House, or I did this and that. I ran debate prep for this person or that person. And they were all answering their phones. And people who were super important, self-important, and people who were activists who were always available and just had the most generous schedule ever were all interacting in ways that I'd never seen before. And we've got to fight for that, because that is something that is going to go away quickly as culture takes over politics. And so we've got to fight for that in rooms like this and say, break down your barriers. You are not too important for anybody you're talking to, and you are not unimportant. You are not too unimportant for anybody you're talking to either. Like, we are equals within this community. And the final piece here is have a generous spirit. The quote that's on our website, the Teddy Roosevelt quote, the part that I want you to focus on here is the part where he says, it's not the critic who counts, right? If you're sitting in the back of a room and being like, this organization should be doing this or that, and you're like talking with your friend, you're the peanut gallery, just check yourself, right? Just check yourself, because unless you're going to the person and actually helping them improve, you're wasting your time and everybody else's here. So get out there and focus on what you're going to do on Monday when you get out of here. And if you've got an idea to improve something, go tell that person and help them. Help them. If we do those 5 things, we're all set. But given the fact that we're in the shadows of NC State, and I was born in 1983, I would be remiss if I didn't end. Do we have any NC State people in the room? There we go. So I'm going to call on you. Be careful. So in my office, when I was running Republic Schools, I had a picture of Valvano above my desk. And some of my former staff members who are here know that I used to make them watch the 30 for 30 video. Those of you who do not know this story, after you watch Ceausescu get deposed in the square, go watch the 30 for 30. We're in the middle of March Madness. We are next to a place that is historic, probably the greatest Cinderella story of all time. And Valvano had a saying, and I'm going to test my NC State people, and I'm going to end with you. All right? He said, you have a perfect day if what 3 things happen? There you go. So this weekend, and shout out to Governor Granholm, maybe we've done this already. We're going to laugh, we're cry, and we're going to think this weekend. That's going to be a success.